നിഷ എന്റെ ഫോൺ എന്തി? വേഴ്സ് മൈ ഫോൺ? എന്റെ ഫോൺ എന്തി? വേഴ്സ് മൈ ഫോൺ? ഏ ആയതാ. നിഷ എന്റെ ഫോൺ എന്തി? ഓ മൈ ഗോഡ്, വേഴ്സ് മൈ ഫോൺ? All those things have appeared on the live stream. Huh? Hello? Hello, Ayla?
Can you hear me, brother?
Yeah. So all the
As
our
soon as
conversation
you,
has
yeah, as
also
soon as,
come.
no,
Huh?
no, no. As soon as you clicked on live stream, it went live.
Okay. You don't have any control, huh?
No, I don't have control now. This has been happening for the past 2, 3 times.
Okay.
Okay, after the meeting, I'll cut this out.
Hmm. Good evening, one and all. Thank you for joining. This is the 146th edition of India Research Meetings. Today, we'll be presenting on the Bible, Science and Book Review, Science and the British Empire. So this was earlier, last week or couple of weeks back was part one. This is a quite big book, so uh, it will, it's not yet over in the second part, so we'll probably have to do a third part. But I'll continue with where we left off last time. So if you remember, it was the trigonometrical survey. So before that, we will stop for a word of prayer, and I invite Mrs. Ruth Mangalwadi to lead us in prayer.
Father, we do commit this time into your hands and ask for your blessing, for understanding, and Lord, for wisdom. Please be with the speaker, Lord. And I'm sorry, I don't know more, but Lord, just commit this time to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for the prayer. So last time I think this is the book. I introduced the book last time and also the author. So I won't go into the details again. So this book was published in 24. It was released last year. So it's quite a new book. It was published posthumously. The author had passed away, and his daughter, took the manuscript and made it into a book. Obviously, he's done exhaustive research. This is one of the most, comprehensive books on science and technology, starting from the 1500s all the way to when the British, all the way even after independence. So I will have to leave out some there's plenty of details, lot of names. So I've tried to summarize it in many ways. So I don't know if I succeeded, but yeah. So an important part of the mission in India was the Tangibar mission, right? So the Tangibar mission was quite an important step uh, in the progression of how India came about scientific knowledge, right? So Tangibar mission was established by actually the Danish Lutheran king established the Tangibar mission in 1706, and later on the Moravian missions, which is they established an independent mission in Tangibar. So Tangibar is a territory in what is now modern Tamil Nadu, and it is colloquially called. The native name in Tamil is Tarangambani, and so it was anglicized, or rather, the Dutch name is, or the Danish name is Tangibar. So it is on the coast of Tamil Nadu. It is close to Chennai. Relatively close to Chennai, but probably around 2-3 hours from there. So what happened is Tangibar mission, right, was established by the king by the Danish king in 1706, and it was primarily established for missionary activities. This was much before William Carey established the Serampore mission. This was at least almost 100 years before William Carey established the uh, mission in Serampore. So this is one of the first Protestant missions, and it has an important role in science, in the development of science, because uh, the Lutherans came, and then the Moravians came, right? The and so uh, and then the English came, right? And because all they were all attracted to that that territory, because it was already a Protestant, like a Protestant enclave, right? So everybody set up some kind of shop there, and the most important, right, was it served as because it was a coastal city and ships came there. A lot of samples, specimens were sent out from Tankibar, right? So um, that was um, that was what was happening from Tangibar, right? And so I'll read directly from the book. Just as Indian kings and feudal lords routinely became patrons of dance, poetry, and art, it became fashionable for European royalty and nobility to collect natural curiosities. Many brilliant but impoverished, um, I think I missed that one sentence here. Uh, Missionaries, right, came there and worked as naturalists, right? So at that time there was no the word used for was natural philosophy for science, and it primarily included study of botany, that is plants and animals and so on and so forth. So if you know Linnaeus is the is considered the father of all modern botany. So he was a Dutch. He never came to India, but um, he set up a, a museum, a natural museum, and in Netherlands or in Denmark, right? And there there what happened is he got this collection. He got all the plants and butterflies and insects and shells, conch shells. They were all sent to this museum. These European museums started to collect all these collectibles from India, right? And these were all sent by these missionaries, right? And because it was primarily a mission, uh, and so these missionaries doubled as naturalists and botanists, and what we today call as botanists. At that time, it was called naturalists. So these people doubled as naturalists and collectors, and uh, so as many as 500 specimens were sent between 1775 and 1778 to England from Tangibar. So as I said earlier, the English Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge, that is SPCK, and they worked in collaboration with the Danish Lutheran, who had originally set up the Tangibar mission, and so that is how these samples were sent. So if you go to the British Museum today, you will find samples, from the Tankibar mission, or if you go to the Danish Museum or the Netherlands Museum, you'll find samples from Tankibar as old as 1700s. So what was very important was this was the first time in the history of India that a systematic study of specimen of plants and I won't say animals, but insects, butterflies, and uh, sea animals like shells, conch shells, small sea animals and even fishes. So this was this was a systematic study, right? This was done by the Tankibar mission, right? And there were and these this book mentions that the Lutherans and the Moravians were theologically at odds, or they were kind of theological enemies, or they didn't match theologically, but still they were united by their love for natural history. Right? So so all of them, all these people, then the Lutherans, the Moravians, and the English Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge, which is basically the Anglicans, and or the English Protestants. It could be Puritans or the Anglicans. They all played a major role in putting all these together, right? So uh, in classifying these plants and you know, I mean, I'll stop short of calling them animals, but butterflies and insects, the insect world, the sea world, etc. So I think this is so the book is very, very agnostic towards any worldview. Uh, it gives due credit to the company or the missionaries where it is due, but it doesn't support their worldview. So so from our viewpoint, I think this worldview is that when Adam and Eve were called by God to name animals after their own kind, right? So that culture was used by these Protestant missionaries to start naming these the flora of India, right? So I will. So the book has a lot of names, excessive amount of names. So some of these names I have tried to capture in a table. Um, so many of them were. There are many people, unlike what is a popular misconception. There were a lot of Europeans in India, not just the British. It was the Danish, then German, British, uh, uh, French. A lot of people were in India starting from the 1500s. I mean, starting ever since Vasco da Gama. I mean, of course, the Portuguese also. So a lot of there are a number of different personalities uh, who did all these things. So uh, so some of them are prominent. Like for example, Koning. He is the founder of Linnean botany in India. So I have already earlier expressed that Linnaeus was the first, the father of botany, or the father of modern, botanical scientific classification of plants. So he was a European. I mean, he never set foot in India, but he Koning introduced this nomenclature, the system of naming plants to India, and he was at first he was a naturalist to the Nawab of Arcot, and eventually he became the East India Company's first natural historian or botanist. So the dates are like in the latter part of the 1700s, right? So um, so many of these, obviously the book goes into some details of their lives. Many of them were very poor, contrary to our expectations. Many of them lived very, uh, miserly, or lives which were not very rich, and so it was a labor of love, or to do many of these things, right? To um, cultivate coffee, cultivate, study animals, collect. plant species. It took extensive tours, interaction with natives, knowing their language, studying their language. Uh, so it was a labor of love, right? So and Tankibar mission, obviously the missionaries were not paid. Um, I mean, they would raise up some support from Europe, but many of them doubled as like this Koning. He doubled as the natural. He worked as the naturalist to Nawab of Harcourt, and eventually becoming the East India Company's first botanist, because he couldn't raise enough support to come up with some of these, to support his life, his mission work in India. So another name is William Roxburgh. So he started cultivating coffee, and he did a research on number of uh, how to get dyes, the color dyes, and from lac and all these some of these animals, and the manufacture of silk. So he is considered the father of botany in Indian botany, and he was the first full-time salaried superintendent of the Calcutta Botanical Garden, right? So it is still in existence. The Calcutta Botanical Garden is still in existence, and so we have a number of actors here, right? Um, so I will also go through I've also tried to summarize some of the books which came out from the Indian subcontinent, right? So these books are uh, many of them were the first scientific publications, right, from India, and all of them obviously were all the initial ones for at least 2 centuries were done by Europeans, and so this I think there's a mistake here. This this gentleman here, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Burrich. So he wrote this letters, diaries, and essays of missionaries, and they were published in periodical English, Dutch, and French. I mean, in Dutch, French, and Latin, right? And so these were some of these important early writings of missionaries, which were published and in small booklets and sold in Europe. And here we have in 1785 somebody publishing a Cynol, published in the Journal of the Royal Prussian Academy of Sciences in Latin. He published a book which was eventually translated into German and French, right? So I think this book, the title is not here, but it was a book on snakes or reptiles. So another one is a well illustrated 12-volume natural history of fishes, published in 1785 to 1799, right? And another one is Johann Klein's 30-page dissertation, The Treatment of Venereal Disease in India, and published in the University of Copenhagen in 1795. So he went to Copenhagen to study medicine and returned in 1971 as a mission doctor, right? He is the first Indian-born mission doctor. Um, so another book is an account of serpents collected on the coast of Coromandel, right? Um, so this was actually published by Russell. Uh, Russell is the famous Russell's viper, which is a snake which is found in India, right? The viper snake. It is named after him. He published this book, an account of snakes, serpents collected on the coast of Coromandel. So his motivation, right? He wished to educate the people on the distinction between poisonous and non-poisonous snakes. so that a snake bite did not always cause fear and anxiety, and harmless snakes were not killed out of ignorance. Harmless snakes have teeth in both upper and lower jaw, while the poisonous snakes do not possess upper teeth. Right? It may not be prudent to check the teeth while the snake is still alive. So obviously, he killed a number of snakes and to study and write an account of this. And so this goes. I mean, this is his motivation, right? To educate the people of India, right? As early as 1796, he writes this book, Account of Serpents, and it was published in. It was published in. And it was published, and it gained considerable. Uh, um, it gained considerable interest in India and as well as obviously more in abroad, and right. We have to remember the book doesn't give the social context of India at that time. So snakes were worshipped in India and feared even now, and people generally are either very fearful of them and hence worship them as deities. So the Shiva is a god where whose neck many snakes are dwelling, right? So snakes are traditionally worshipped in India and very very much feared. They were never studied. So there was a lot of misconception and fear and ignorance uh, among the Indian population. And Russell came and wrote this book, An Account of Serpents, to educate the Indian population about the distinction between poisonous and non-poisonous snakes. It's so quite remarkable that somebody from Europe should come in the 1700s and dedicate his a good part of his life to write a book on snakes to educate the people of India, right, who feared snakes and worshipped them. Right? So the book obviously doesn't go into such worldview things. Um, so there are a number of botanical gardens in India, right? So um, one was it's still existing in Calcutta, and the other one is in Saharanpur. And many were privately. So a lot of people, a lot of Englishmen or Europeans came to India and did their own private things which were not supported by the company or the government. So, one example is John Malcolm established an experimental botanical and agricultural garden in near Pune Pune, and presented it to the company. Right, it was located in the 70 acres and purchased as his personal residence. Eventually the garden was closed, but we find a lot of such examples in some of them well-off Europeans, which established gardens and observatories and wrote books on their own private money and time, uh, not out of curiosity and in a foreign land. So motivations are not purely commercial, right? Like the East India Company would, a lot of people would say the East India Company's motive was purely commercial, which is false, because a lot of these actors came to India and they were either employees of most of them were employees of the company until 1860 when the company was dissolved, right? So up until that time, a lot of them had many private pursuit which enriched the scientific knowledge of India, right? Uh, so we will go into so the book is a little haphazard because it goes from botany to coal and then back again to botany because it's so I was also forced to follow the pattern of the book, right? So another important the chapter in India's history is coal because um, as you know, it is very today it is extremely important for India because around 74% or 75%, this three-fourth of India's energy comes from coal, and it is the second large, so, I mean, it is number two in coal consumption worldwide. And of course, it has the fourth largest coal reserves globally. So this is present data, right? But how did India discover this coal, right? So that is uh, very important because the British already had railways. By the time they entered India, they were building the railways, and coal was an important energy source for steam engines, right? So um, so there are the book offers a number of biographies on many people, right? Botanists, explorers, and many people, right? And one of them is William Jones. He is the architect. He also happened to be the architect of Bishop's College, Calcutta, and he was a failure in his own life, right? And he ran a factory in the early part of the 1800s, 1811. He had a canvas manufacturing factory in Howrah, and also because of all kinds of problems, including the lack of government support, he had to shut it down, right? And eventually, he was hired by the government to explore coal, and he discovered uh, some what is known as the Raniganj seam. The seam is a used term used in mineral prospecting, and it is it is some kind of like a vein of gold or a deposit, a huge reserve of coal in the earth. So he discovered that, and he mined and sold the coal from that seam. But he was a commercial failure. He died bankrupt in India, and he eventually, who benefited from that was the grandfather of Rabindranath Tagore, Dwaragnath Tagore, and he purchased this from his the debtors of William Jones for some very small price, and eventually Dwaragnath Tagore became was company was the had the monopoly of coal in India, right? And there was an assured buyer, that is the government, which had nine steamboats or steam vessels operating out of various parts of North India, like Calcutta or Ganga and many of these places, right? So this is the start of the coal. I mean, I named this slide Coal Committee, which is not exactly correct, but this is the start of the coal exploration in India. While formally, uh, a six-member committee was appointed for investigating coal and mineral resources of India in 1835, and a surgeon was made its secretary, right? And they contacted uh, the British geologists. He contacted the British geologists and to inquire how to go about this task of exploring for coal, and so on their recommendation, somebody known as David Williams took up an appointment as the geological surveyor in the service of the East India Company in 1846. So So he came to India. He hoped to earn money for the sake of our little one. So that is basically to fend for his family, right? And so the book gives an important perspective here. European professionals in India believed that their own financial considerations, the company's commercial interests, and and Europe's scientific agenda would all converge, right? Williams hoped that the survey of Indian coal fields will eventually turn out both in an economic point of view and a branch of the Geological Survey of Great Britain. So the Geological Survey of Great Britain had already started, right? That is why the coal committee's secretary wrote to the British geologists. So, but eventually, this the first the geological surveyor, David Williams, he became a martyr for coal. He was exploring the forests on elephants, right? And during one of the field explorations, Williams fell off the elephant and caught some fever and died, right? And he never saw his family. He came here to earn something for his young or family, but eventually he became a martyr for coal. And interestingly, we still have scams in India surrounding coal. If you read the papers, it's many major scams are still going on regarding coal. But here we have a martyr for coal from from Britain, who died exploring for coal. And so eventually the coal committee became the Geological Survey of India. So and it produced some some really it did it not just it did not limit itself to a survey. It eventually started producing scientific, really deep scientific work. So the another name is Thomas Oldham, who was at that time a professor of geology at Trinity College, Dublin, and he came to India and he was the surveyor, right? The surveyor of the geological survey, right? And he held this post in 1851 to 1876, and that was when the name was changed from Coal Committee to Geological Survey. And what began as a simple quest for coal ended in providing evidence for the continental drift hypothesis and an addition to geological terminology. Right? So, so many people came. I mean, many educated people came from London, right? You have, uh, and you know, followed him, right? And Thomas Oldham, and eventually he used the term. So this is called the Gondwana system, right, for coal bearing formation in the Satpura Basin, right? So the Gondwana is a term created to mean land of Gonds. So Gonds is a tribes, the bunch of tribes in Bihar or Madhya Pradesh or some of these places, I imagine, right? And I'm not very familiar with the geography, but so here, eventually, this became a uh, this term Gondwana became a a word which now means the hypothesized supercontinent of the on in the southern hemisphere. So before Noah's flood, right, all Earth was one. There were no continents. Right, it was just one single landmass. So this Gondwana land eventually became this term which was coined by the Geological Survey of India, became the term for use for the that piece of land which was the undisturbed or the undivided piece of land which represented all the land masses of the earth. So, um, so that is what it the survey produced the term which became like a really a scientific term, like a term which could be used worldwide. Right? So that is how the Call Committee, which started with the martyr, um, and ended in producing of this scientific term on the on of course, and we built on that. The modern India built on that, and now it is it's just 75% of the earth's, India's electricity or energy production is from this coal, which was lying all around. I mean, all along it was lying in, underground, but no Indian had, ever thought of using that as a energy source, because the energy source in India was mostly firewood, was very primitive, or mostly firewood or, cow manure, which was dried up and used as cake. For cooking food or as fuel, right? So here we have how nature was exploited, or nature was the resources of nature was used. I don't say, I won't say the word exploited, but rightfully used to produce good for mankind. It is dominion over nature, right? Um, so this gives an interesting thing, how interesting episode, right? How many people from Europe, or Englishmen or Europeans, they came to India. They thought they would prosper, right? But many of them died or were bankrupt trying to do things here. So it is not a very rosy picture as we imagine today, right? Some foreigners come here and exploit us and take away all the wealth. And no, it was, if you read the details, it is definitely not that. Right? So, as we see in this entire area of coal exploration, right? Um, I'm just summarizing some of the things, right? So the survey of India takes its root back in 1767 in the appointment of Ranel as the Surveyor General of Bengal. So apart from the medical service, the Survey of India and Geological Survey were the only other services in British India under the company rule. So this Geological Survey came from the core committee, right? So one thing was obvious, right? The British were interested in uh, mostly interested in things which would have commercial value for them, right? For like coal, um, but again we see the Tankibar missionaries and many other private, even the employees of the East India Company do many things on the side, not officially sanctioned, which was more like a labor of love, which eventually enriched the scientific community, or things in like India. So William Carey's agricultural and agricultural society is not mentioned in this book. Clearly, William Carey is mentioned as a side note. So because the focus is more on like the official British, officially sanctioned British, surveys and institutions. So obviously William Carey doesn't fall into that category. So the book almost avoids that. Uh, So another important thing is the tea. Right? So tea, as we know today, as we know today, is a huge beverage popular worldwide, but uh, it originated in China, right? And at one time, and Europe developed a taste for tea, and it was imported from China, right? And in 1823, the Royal Society of Arts offered a gold medal or 50 uh, gold coins to the person who should grow and prepare the greatest quantity of China tea of good quality, not being less than 20 pounds weight, and should import the same into Great Britain. Right? Uh, so they were trying to find a different source for tea and from other than China, right? And um, obviously there were no takers at that time, right? But um, so we come to another committee called the tea committee, and uh, so the Governor General of Bengal, William Bendick, and he constituted a tea committee which would uh, uh, you know try to uh, cultivate tea in India, right? So it is so this as we know today, right? Tea is the estate, um, the estates for cash crops like tea, rubber, cashew, or many spices. Many of these estates form a huge employment for Indians, right? So it was absent before the British came. So the British were the first, the people who set up these plantations, in the plantation economy, and so they worked with a number of people, right? So they had to hire botanists and people who are knowledgeable about plants. So a number of so there was the tea committee and there was this tea commission, both operating in parallel, um, and and some important names like Bruce, Charles Bruce was an important name because he was eventually successful in uh, convincing the natives. So the I have not summarized that part of the story here. So the tea from China was it was thought to be impossible to grow tea outside China, but eventually people started, the British explorers started noticing that tea was found in Assam and Burma, uh, growing in the wild. So what happened is, how do we domesticate, or how do you identify those plants, those wild tea plants, and grow them in large plantations, and and cut off the dependence on China, right? So that was the main problem, right? Because tea was very commercially lucrative, and even it is, even the US history has this Boston Tea Party where people dumped the tea, right, because of the huge uh, tax monopoly the East India Company and the British government had on tea, right? Uh, so growing tea was very important commercial activity, right? So eventually these committees, right, tea committee and the tea commission, and Bruce, Charles Bruce, right, Charles Bruce, he um, he went through miles and miles of jungles looking for tea plants, and persuading the natives, right, the natives as in the tribal, in the Assam, in Assam and Bengal and Burma, right? So those hilly areas where tea grows naturally, right? So he had some extraordinary talent. So he was not a botanist, but he was a people person who eventually managed to convince them to aid him in the discovery and growth of this tea. And this 8 chests of Assam tea was auctioned in London in 1839. So by 1866, so summary of this entire activity is it was very successful. And in 1866, 96% of tea imported into England came from China, only 4% from India. 20 years later, 1886, China's share fell to 59%. Right? And you see corresponding rise in India's share. And obviously, Ceylon also, Sri Lanka, which is a major tea producer even now, um, started contributing. And in by 1903, India's share was 60%, right? And Ceylon tea was 30%, right? So so the book describes it as there was a lot of commissions and committees and formed to typical bureaucratic committees formed towards the cultivation of tea. But in as like in many cases, right, you have a lot of government committees and bureaucracy. But eventually, it was one or two people like Charles Bruce uh, who took the bull by its horns and finally solved the problem and made India a tea drinking nation. Eventually, the export to London. Um, Finally, uh, exporting tea to London from Indian tea plantations. Eventually, the local population also developed a tea drinking habit, which we see today, right? And uh, that is what is eventually India also becomes a tea drinking nation, right? Um, so just like the British, right? The people in India have tea with milk and sugar, while the Chinese drink green tea, right? So they don't put milk or sugar in their tea. So um, so eventually, I that the book doesn't go into that, but it doesn't go into like a bird's eye view of this entire thing of how the British worldview or the biblical worldview brought about by the British jump started India's plantation economy, right? Eventually, rubber became a huge plantation crop. These cash crops became a lucrative economical, agricultural economy, right? So, tea, rubber, spices, and coffee, all these were brought by. I mean, of which only tea was probably native only to like a very small part of Assam and Burma, but eventually it spread all over India, right? So, they have tea plantations in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and, I mean, very far away from Assam, right? So, and rubber plantations and coffee in Karnataka and all these places. So, huge plantation economy was kick-started by this, some of these things. So, we'll go into next, the book goes into the Forestry Act. So there are some colorful, interesting characters there also. So what was happening was um, uh, a large number of surgeons, basically Scottish surgeons, came to India in the East India Company surgeon service because doctors were indispensable, and they started. Many of them were made into botanists and foresters, right? So. Um, Eventually, the forest, the botanists and the foresters were all, Scott surgeons and doctors. So, um, so what happened is this: the shipbuilding industry was, the British initiated the shipbuilding industry in India because the ships were. Um, there was a huge need to build ships in India, right? And because the lumber or the lumber in England couldn't, I mean, it obviously was very limited. The supply was very limited, and India was a lucrative, lumber. I mean, with this huge forest, India had a lucrative, uh, cache of lumber, right? So eventually, this lumber also started depleting, and there came about a post known as the conservator of forest, right? In the Bombay presidency, right? And so um, so there was some typical bureaucratic, commissioner of forest and forest department, and so we see the origins of the current forest department and the Indian Forest Service, which is still there. The Indian Forest Service feeds off the IAS and the IPS and the ICS, and um, so Indian Forest Service was formally notified in 1869, and an interesting character is a German named Brandis. He was the first, joint commissioner of forest, right? And um, employed two other Germans, right? And so this, how this, there's an interesting story of how this German came to India, right? Because um, the British and the Germans were not exactly friends from even from older I mean even from the old times, let alone during World War II. Um, so eventually, this Indian Forest Service and the Central Forest School, which was still functioning in Dehradun, and and the first Indian was a Parsi, right? The first Indian forest officer was a Parsi from Bombay, right? So we will eventually see that this book. How Parsis had an important role. Parsis, which were Persians, really it literally means Persians, right? So they came from Persia as refugees due to the conquest of Islam, and they were given refuge in India on the condition that they would adapt to local customs. So Parsis played a big role in nation building, and because they settled in Gujarat, and they were friendly to the Portuguese and eventually to the British also, right? And they were, unlike the Hindus, they were monotheists. And I mean, the book doesn't give these, the reasons for any of these things, but somehow the Parsis endeared themselves to the foreign powers, both the Portuguese and the British, and they trained under them and eventually produced many important figures in the important figures of nation building in the early part of in the 1800s. Um, so we'll just for interest, we'll go into this personality called Dietrich Brandis, who's the father of forestry worldwide. So he was the first, the conservator of forest in India, and he happened to produce, we could rightfully call him the father of forestry worldwide. So he was born in Germany, and he obtained a doctorate by 1848. And his connection to India was he married Rachel Marshman, who was the daughter of the famed Serampur missionary Dr. Joshua Marshman. And so. So through his connection, that was the India connection, right? So uh, I mean, through various networks of the British aristocracy and the East India Company, eventually, which you see described here, right? Her brother John Clark Marshman was instrumental in bringing Rachel and her and her new husband, right, her second husband, to India, right? And eventually, he was the first conservator of forest, and he trained uh, he trained many people. He trained this another German called Schilch, and who later moved on to England and was the pioneering professor of the of forestry in Cooper Hill College, and that was the first formal forestry course in England. And eventually he moved on to Oxford to establish the Oxford forestry program there. So that is his protege, this German named Schill. And Brandes eventually moved on to London, where he trained a number of students, a large batch of students in Germany and Switzerland. And his another of his protege became the first head of the U.S. Forest Service. And President Roosevelt apparently uh, appreciated Brandes' work for the cause of forestry in the United States, even though it was his disciple who was the one who did that, who was the conservator of forest of the U.S. Forest Service. Um, so eventually, Brandes was a pioneer, and he returned to Bonn, and his truth in his foundational doctrine was that in the long run forestry cannot succeed unless the people who live in and near the forest are for it and are not against it. So I think this is so the books calls, says that this fundamental doctrine has been long forgotten in India, where he began his career. And he began his career because of his missionary connections, because of his wife's missionary connections to Serampore, William Carey, Serampore. So, um, in this time, so this uh, today we have a large conflict of in the forest, right? In the forest area of man-animal conflict, and tribals and different kinds of conflicts, right? Over exploitation of forests and many of these things. And it is interesting to note that the first or the father of forestry in India as well as worldwide, this German person named Dietrich Brandis, uh, you know, uh, uh, came up with this doctrine of forestry, right? So there are many interesting characters. The book goes into in great detail. It goes into the biographical some of these biographical details of these characters. You will find countless, Europeans and Britishers, and Britishers obviously are the majority, but Germans and French and all kinds of people who and people in England who had never set foot in India, but who encouraged this, who encouraged the Geological Survey of India, the Botanical Survey of India. There are a number of names. If you, so I've just tried to summarize some interesting, occurrences and names, and try to put them in some kind of current context, right? Of what our nation is going through at this time. So the Geological Survey also was there, but it was a disaster. But it was a disaster. We learned that the Geological Survey was, eventually the Coal Committee became the Geological Survey, but the very first geological survey appointment, geological appointment in India was a, imposition from the top with disastrous results. So many times it was, the bureaucratic process of the company, the East India Company, and was not a success because they couldn't find the right people, or the time was not yet ripe. So for example, the Indian tea, the Indian tea the tea in Assam and Burma was discovered in 1820, but only by the 1850s was the tea, formally, cultivated and exported to England. So as they say, there's a time and tide for everything, right? So interesting look. And another is this interesting area in which the book goes into shipbuilding. And I won't go into it long. I mean, in detail in because we'll have a third part to this uh, because the book is very huge. And here also there's a Parsi family which owns the shipbuilding dock of Mumbai, right? So Mumbai was the place for the British to build their ships, and they use the forests of India, right, for timber. And the British forests were depleted, and the British forests were mostly Britishers used mostly the oak wood. And when they came to India, they found a better wood, which is teak, which was resistant to insects and seawater. So the British got a better deal because better quality resources, and the labor also was cheaper, right, compared to England. So shipbuilding took off in a huge way in India, and they produced ships for the British and for other European powers, and for private, like today we have private yacht for millionaires, right? So at that time also there were private ships owned by rich people. So India started producing these ships, and the Parsis, um, based out of Bombay, Parsis literally meaning Persians, um, who came to India as religious refugees during the Islamization of Persia, which is current day Iran. Right? So eventually, this what is interesting is this Parsi, the first Royal Society fellow, the first native Royal Society fellow, that is the first Indian to be made a fellow of the Royal Society, was a Parsi, and he was a shipbuilding engineer. So that is why this is very interesting, because to most people, the mathematical genius, um, Srinivas Ramanujan was the first fellow of the Royal Society, right? So, but before that, in even as early as 1840s, this shipbuilding industry produced this a fellow of the Royal Society of England, right? Um, that in itself is a interesting study, because this person eventually dies in England. This fellow of the Royal Society, he was never recognized in India, but the British recognized him, and he was taken to the Queen's wedding, Queen Victoria's wedding, and he was, a big celebrity. I mean, a reasonably big celebrity in England. So this Parsi Indian, right? So it and there were English people, there were English Britishers working under him in India. So this dispels the myth that you know. Britishers came to India and made them slaves. No, I mean, if that was the case, then how could a Parsi Indian, right, become a fellow of the Royal Society, and have Britishers, white people, reporting to him, right? So in India, right, in the Bombay shipping docks, right? So this book is it forces us to think, and how how beneficial this uh, East India Company and uh, the British rule was to India, right? So how um, it unlocked the native resources of India and produced the big economic economic leap forward in terms of coal and plantation and many of these shipbuilding, which was now all these industries which were never native to India, right? So because Indians never built ships, despite this 200, 2,500 and 2,500 kilometer plus coastline, Indians never built ships because getting out of India would make you an outcast or a mlecha, right? Um, going out, venturing into the ocean would make you lose your caste. So why would I build a ship and lose my caste privilege or my status in society, right? So all these industries which are critical to modern day India, right? Minerals, plants, and uh, many of these things which are natural, and of course things which are man-made like ships, right? So uh, the British and the Europeans, like the Tangibar mission, the missionaries in the Tangibar mission, right? Both the Lutherans and the Moravians uh, brought this biblical worldview and made India what created modern India, right? So um, I think that is um the book has a table in which I've tried to paste it here. A number of publications starting early as 1526 all the way up to 1678, when Hortus Malabaricus, the famous book, was of the plants of Kerala, right, was published in Latin in Amsterdam, not in Kerala in Malayalam or any native language, but it was published in Amsterdam in Latin. Right, so plenty of books. This book has a treasure trove of the titles of books, which collecting these titles itself is the author, the year is a painstaking task, which I've attempted to do a little bit in these in these tables, right? So mm, in these tables, right? I've attempted to do that, but there are tons of such books, of which many of them are not relevant to India because they are relevant to Europe and America, right? Some he has summarized in a table, of which only one I see is relevant to India. But so so much of scholarship, of work, of books describing the flora, fauna, and the people and the geology and the minerals, and have come out of India in starting from the Portuguese, yeah, all the way up to the British, as late as 1900. Uh, so that brings us to the uh, end of this part two of this book, review of the book review of part two book review of this book, Science and British uh, Science and British Empire by Rajesh Kochhar. So thank you all for listening, and I think now is the time for any questions, if any.
Thank you so much, Prashant, for doing all the hard work for us, delving into all the minutiae, and fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it becomes interesting when you realize that, these are things I use today, right? Like tea, right? I drink tea every day, like twice, two to three times a day. Every Indian does that, right? So where did this tea come from? Like, and then we use this electricity, which is from coal, which many people may not be aware, right? 75% of coal comes from, electricity comes from coal, which is mined in India. And this is set up by the British for, the coal committee, right? So, and interesting stories about how a man died, searching for coal, right? So, uh, yeah.
And the study of snakes, I would never do that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? That's, that is a labor of love, right?
Yeah. I wish the present government would understand all of this. The Lord is just amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, Prasanth here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's Jyoti Joseph here. I just wanted to ask you a generic question. Okay.
Mhm.
I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, yeah, perfectly, perfectly.
Yeah, yeah. So my question is that if you talk about science,
Mhm.
and as we all know that classical science, that is the science starting from Isaac Newton,
Mhm.
that actually has a biblical base.
Right.
If you delve deeper into the and how it started all with the Protestant Reformation and how science came into existence. But currently, as of now, in today's times, uh, uh, there is this kind of things. A thing is said right now that the true science or the classical science has taken a backseat over quantum physics. So quantum physics is at the frontier, and quantum physics has a lot of parallels in Eastern philosophies, especially Buddhism, Hinduism, and Chinese Confucianism, because there has been a lot of books written since 1970s highlighting these parallels. So can you just tell me, how does what's the difference between classical and the so-called Newtonian physics and quantum physics, and how does quantum physics, kind of mirror more the Eastern philosophies? Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, this is way out of scope for me as well as this talk because I'm not a physicist. I have no clue about this, but I have thought about it in the past. Obviously, I have read some of these articles which have pointed you also in that similar direction, right? So. I would say that uh, quantum physics, which is about the duality of the particle and the dual behavior of a wave and particle, right? So the electron can have it can act as a particle and it can act as a wave, right? So that's what I understand, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. That is more related to the dual nature of God, right? Dual nature of Jesus, who is perfectly man and perfectly God, right? So here you have Jesus, who is perfectly God and perfectly, man, right? So here is, the electron is also perfectly, wave and perfectly particle, right? So I think, the anti-Christians are more interested in leading science or trying to drag science into the pagan worldviews, right? Because it kind of uh, they confirms their anti-Christian bias, right? So while in reality it might more be aligned to Christian worldview. That's what my understanding is.
Yeah. Well, if I may
Yes, yes.
interject on it, in this book, when the New Age gets old, I have a very long 30-page answer to the question that Jyotsan has asked, this whole chapter, which is called From New Physics to Hinduism, was uploaded on my website, vishalmangalwadi.com, but we lost that website. So we have Oila here online, and that's one of the things we need to do is to we don't have the digital version of it, but we need to digitize it and put it again on the website. So if we'll try and do it soon, there are people who have offered to with this kind of help, but the I studied the question in 1989, 1990, and wrote this long answer to the question. So, but I won't go into the details of the discussion now, except that since Oila is here with us, request her to make sure that we put that back in our website on Revelation Movement. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that would, I'll have to go through that piece of literature and then come back if there is more
Well,
questions. That's a
I'll,
very
I'll
deep.
I'll put my email in the chat, so uh, do remind me. It's a tedious thing that we have to digitize the printed version and then upload it. But if you email me the question again as a reminder, I will ask. Bonnie is not online, is he? Bonnie just asked me how can he help, and maybe this is something that he can do. Yep. Good. I just put my email in the chat.
Sure, Vishal, I'll do it. What you just said, I'll just get it done. I'll just rephrase and paraphrase the question in a subtle and very concise way, and
Yeah.
then you can do the rest. Yeah, thank you.
My book was first published in England called In Search of Self Beyond the New Age. And then the American version is what I showed you. I'm putting the name of my book. It has never been published in India. So the American version of the book, that particular appendix, the editor decided to put it as an appendix rather than as a chapter. The It's a long story, but so I'm putting the American title of the book, which is a better one because a scientist from Bell Tech, Bell Laboratories, he improved a whole paragraph in my chapter. So US version is better on this chapter.
Do we have an Indian version? Is that book
No,
available
no,
in
it has
India?
never been published. There are no Indian Christian publishers who are interested in these things.
Oh.
Further questions about, thank you. Any further questions about the talk?
Well, I can make a few comments.
Yes.
One is that well, as Ruth said, your presentation was very helpful. Thank you for the hard work. What we now need is someone, not someone, but a whole group of people taking up details of these men, mostly men, some women, like Brandis, the forestry guy, and doing research into their religious and theological outlook. That is very important. And we can't put all of these things in books, but we've started the initiative to get the encyclopedia going. So encyclopedia should have chapters on all of these characters, but what the writer doesn't do, looking at the theology and spirituality that drove these men. The simple question is, why weren't Indians looking for coal or tea or taxonomy? Why were Europeans doing it? Where did that whole outlook came that this is a legitimate human pursuit to study plants and animals and name them? William Carey had a huge collection of stones, which doesn't appear in this book. His stone collection is still there. Actually, he had the second best botanical garden. He worked for many years in the Calcutta Botanical Garden as an assistant, but then he started his own in Sirampur. But that was washed away twice by floods in Hooghly, so it doesn't exist anymore. But the theology behind the Linnean system of taxonomy that actually began in Basel when the Roman Catholics persecuted the French Calvinists, Huguenots. They, one of them was a medical doctor. He moved to Basel and he became interested in obeying the command that we should study all the animals, name all the animals. But when you study animals, you have to study their food, which is the agriculture, the plants, botanical. So the whole, his sons, his two sons were really the founders of the taxonomy, which then Linnean, who was a Lutheran, they were Huguenots in Switzerland, in Basel, and Linnean was in Scandinavia. And then he systematizes. He was also son of a pastor, and it was his father who cultivated his interest in agriculture. So all of that theological worldview, that why didn't any Indian do this? Lots of Indians, ashrams were in forests. Why weren't they studying forestry and botany, etc.? Why were these people studying? And so we need to have a number of people who will study these things and post about these individuals in our encyclopedia. So the writing could already begin if somebody wanted to write and send it all to you, the details of these people. So you've given the overview, but we need to have the details. And then in few months, 6 months, hopefully, all this content should go into encyclopedia. Short essays on different personalities and different books that are mentioned here. So this is a mine. The book is a mine as you are harvesting it, digging through it. That's what has to happen. Just a few more interesting things is that from Ruth's father's family, father's side, they were sent to Kumau for tea plantation after the British-Chinese war, when China stopped selling tea to England. The British wanted to grow tea in India, and Kumau was considered a possibility, and therefore Ruth's father's side of the family, they were given large tracts of land to grow tea. But it didn't work because you need more than mountainous terrain, the water and the timing and the climate, etc. So it didn't work. But that is one interesting thing. The other interesting thing, you mentioned quite a bit about the Parsis in Bombay area. Wilson College was established in 1832. And Mr. Wilson himself, who founded the college, he took a lot of interest in mentoring these Parsis. So Prabhu Guptara did a lot of study at one stage of the impact of Wilson College on the intellectual and economic life of the Parsis around Bombay. So that would be something which would be very good to study and highlight. So they looked up. So Wilson was looked upon as the mentor and father of the intellectual and economic development of the Parsi community in Western India. That's something I haven't actually seen what Prabhu wrote, but he must have his notes. And at some stage, it would be good to get him to talk about it and at least uh, submit it to us. He interviewed many Parsi um, wealthy people, particularly with respect to their social contribution to society. And that's where he discovered that a lot of the development happened because of Wilson College and Mr. Wilson himself. So those are just few uh, interesting details, but
Yeah, this book, Sanskrit and the British Empire by the same author.
mhm,
This has a very interesting. So in the very beginning, he has around 5 pages of tables, tables after tables, where he summarizes all the names of the various names starting from 1544 all the way up to 1951 of people who contributed to Sanskrit I mean, most of them are, of course, foreign names, not Indian names. And of course, I mean, famous Max Muller and many of these people are also there. So I actually scanned these tables and uploaded them for anybody interested. I'm planning to make from this book. This book, the which I reviewed, it doesn't have systematic table like this, even though the same author has I mean, different book which has a systematic table. Just to get the names of the books and the dates, the author, and the content. That is like a huge task because it is spread all over the text and
yeah,
obviously.
I'd be very interested in a link to the table that you have scanned and uploaded.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. We'll send it out. Uh,
Thank you.
yeah, so that just making the books, I mean, the just making a table of the books itself is I mean, it's a very revealing thing because it's like just, it gives it to you in a systematic fashion, and I mean, that reveals the depth and the timeline to which it is, this undertaking of I mean, the cataloging of knowledge has happened in India by Europeans, right? So,
Yeah, well, we should connect with the author and take his permission to upload the table on our encyclopedia.
yeah, unfortunately, he is no more. He passed
Okay.
away. Yeah, he was probably
Uh,
in his 80s or 90s. So his daughter is there, but yeah, she is the one who
yeah,
published this book. Yeah,
yeah, we should take her permission and publish the table
yeah.
in the encyclopedia. But thank you for doing this research. Hopefully, you will stimulate many more people. Since you have already done such a good PowerPoint, it will be important to turn it into a chapter
Yes, yes, that's what I'm doing.
or 2 chapters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because we have to I mean, it's the difficulty is in summarizing in a in a very concise way the wealth of information and the wealth of names, uh, and just sticking to the bare details, right? So
yeah.
that's the challenge here, right?
Well, you do what you can, and then others who can help in improving it.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
my book on Islam, on which we're working now every day, and hope to finish it within the next week, 10 days. There's a revision. Whole number of people have improved upon it. Right now, a 17-year-old girl is helping improve every sentence. She's doing a very good job of editing. And whatever we write, we have to submit it to a number of people to improve it.
That's right. Yes. Okay. If there are no more questions, thank you for questions. Thank you for attending this talk and asking questions. And so see you next time. I think we can end with a